MPs are debating a second round of indicative votes on an alternative Brexit option.
Yeah, the votes will be on two softer forms of Brexit, a second referendum and a plan to give Parliament more control. For more, we're joined by the Dean of Law and Government at Durham University, Professor Thom Brooks. Professor Brooks, thanks so much for your time. What's your best guess on how this unfolds today? It's obviously very difficult to predict anything when it comes to Brexit, but what's your best guess at this point?
Well, it's certainly very difficult to guess what will come next in this continuing incredible saga. All of the options right now in front of Parliament are all largely looking at different kinds of soft Brexits, or indeed maybe no Brexit at all. So I think that if there's anything to go by right now, we're looking at some likelihood of a support for Britain being part of a kind of customs union with the European Union, a softer Brexit rather than a hard Brexit. But at these times, it's anyone's guess as to what they're going to do right now. At the moment, we know everything about what they don't like, very little what they do like.
Yep. I couldn't agree more with you there on that assessment. In the end, I think it comes down to the date. I mean, are we still looking at April 12, whatever Brexit may look like? Or there is talk of a general election, but those who've voted against Theresa May's plan in her own cabinet are now saying don't call an election. She's between a rock and a hard place.
She's in a very difficult position. So if she were to call an election, one of the real fears that her party has is that the Labour Party, in one of the latest polls, was found to be 5 points ahead of the Tories, and the European issue has been a very big one for them, and it's been her government in control of this current process. They're very worried about how that outcome might spell out. And also, I think, to be fair, an election will be very difficult because it'll take some time. It will require the European Union giving a green light to a wider extension of Brexit, but without the certainty of knowing what will happen next. I think if members of Parliament can't decide things this week, in the next few days, what will happen next, I think it is very likely we might see some return to some type of referendum, probably on the Prime Minister's deal or cancelling Brexit. I think European Union would be okay with that, potentially, because that would give certainty as to whether they had agreed to the Prime Minister's deal. They, of course, would like Britain to remain. So either of those options would give some finality. And if the public were able to back a deal that MPs could not, that might help change the mind of some MPs into backing the deal. At the same time, if the public were to conclusively be against Theresa May's deal, then given the fact that no one seems to like any other option, that might well end the talk of Brexit, well, for now, until the next election. And then I'm sure it'll all come back.
Professor Brooks, what are the implications for Theresa May? She did indicate to her Tory colleagues that she might stand down earlier than intended, but is she bound to that if they don't back her deal?
She's not bound legally, so lawfully she can stay on for another few years if she's able to avoid a no confidence vote. She's protected in her own party by having, you'll recall, a few months ago, right before Christmas, she survived a no-confidence vote in her party. So members of her party cannot remove her as the leader of the Conservatives until November. So she's safe in that regard. Where she is not safe at all is in the House of Commons, so in leading the government. Now, the rules were changed to make it more difficult changing governments after the 2010 coalition government. Britain hasn't had a coalition for a long time, and when it did, change the rules to make it more difficult to unseat it. But if the House of Commons were to find a no confidence in the government, then that would spell the end of May. And I think, quite frankly, that is coming probably this week. I mean, it's very difficult to see a prime minister leading a government who was unable to command at any time a majority in Parliament, someone whose deal has been defeated soundly 3 times, seems to have no other plan B, and isn't able to get anything else passed. I mean, this is really beyond shambolic by any stretch of the imagination, whatever the political angle or spin someone would want to try to put on this. This is really the scraping the bottom of the barrel. So I think that if we see if we see no movement on her end as to getting ourselves out of this mire, then I think then a vote of no confidence in House of Commons that will pass is looking pretty likely, especially if she refuses to go without being thrown out, which will then put the country in quite a mess, given that I think a general election and delaying Brexit is not something the European Union in particular is going to want to see. And I think, to be fair, a lot of the public probably not so keen to go back to the polls one way or the other either.
Professor Thom Brooks, Australia's a lovely place, you know. Good luck over there. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Pleasure.